Yeehaw and welcome to the Austin Major. This is presented by Blast this time, and this is also the first major we've gotten in America in 7 years. Not to mention a new format, slightly different here. There's gonna be no BO5s the entire event. It's gonna end in best of threes. There's gonna be 3 Swiss stages with 8 teams progressing each time, and there'll be best of ones until they're a promotion or an elimination match, then there'll be a best of 3. So why don't we just hop into stage 1 and see how it started. So considering this is a major on American soil, there's gonna be 3 teams that are from America trying to move on in stage 1 and try to hopefully make it all the way to the playoff bracket. Highest rated of all of them and over 22% of all the brackets to be a 3-0 were Complexity. Now, Hawzerk, which is one of their star-studded players, isn't going to be able to play in this event. Instead, Junior would be filling in for them. And the first map, we would kind of get to see a loose shakeout of how it would go. And it's gonna go well, right? Right? Well, let's just say OG had other plans in mind and it didn't go so well. As you can see from these highlights, Nico was just straight slaying out with 33 kills. In the end, Complexity would fall to a belittling 13-3. And Nico would go on to set the highest record in a major ever achieved with a 3.08 rating. So now that over 20% of brackets are no longer perfect, Complexity would go on to play their next match versus Fluxo, and well, they would return to form, getting a victory, ending up 1-1 on the day. So moving on to the next team that has one of the highest pick'em rates to go 3-0, Heroic, and well, they came out of the gate swinging. They started off by playing the Warriors, got a pretty commanding victory 13-7, and they went on to play one of the American darlings, NRG, and defeated them 13-5. And speaking of 2-0s, FlyQuest came out of the gate. They beat Fluxo really quickly early on, had a good game there, but then went on to play BetBoom, which is actually a team that many people had moving on, and they were able to defeat them as well. FlyQuest rookie Netix would deliver a stellar performance in this game. He would go 20-11 with a 116 ADR, holding a 1.71 rating. And it would be interesting to see how this team would move on, considering that only 1.65% of all players doing Pick'em had even predicted them to be 3-0. At the end of day 1, they're 2-0, 1 game away from achieving that. So moving on to the youngest team in the major, with just the average age of barely over 20, we had B8. Now coming in strong, we want to see how they had fare first versus Imperial, and boy, was this a close one. But speaking of close ones, this Ninja Defuse, oh dude, just check it out.
They get it done with less.
I think, is he gonna try and do something weird, or is this just exits here for Che? Bomb's ticked, pretty far gone.
Oh my god.
I want to say no.
Oh my
I want to say there's no way in
Oh
hell,
my god.
He's giving it a go.
Oh my god, they're
close
not
enough.
here. They're not here. Che, major debut, tries to defuse, but just seconds short. Oh, that's respect for trying.
Yeah, that was close.
I mean, that is just unbelievable, and they didn't even need that to get the victory. They would go on to win 13-11 in spite of the near miracle play. Next up, they would go on to play OG, and versus them, they would win 13-9 to move on to a perfect 2-0 to start the day. Moving on to America's final darling, and that is Wildcard. Now, a little bit of interesting thing happened here in their first match versus Mesoport. We had 2 twins playing each other, which is probably the first time this has ever happened, especially at a major. You had Sus versus Adam B. Sus would get the last laugh at the end of the day as they would defeat Mesoport, and they would move on to try to win again versus Lynn Vision later in the day, and that would actually be the longest match of the day, ending up being 19-17. But man, will you check out this Deagle.
No one looking. No.
What the?
I didn't know it was 4.
Oh my God.
Holy.
Graffiti.
Write it down.
Graffiti moment for JBA.
True.
Like I said, what an incredible quad feed. But at the end of the day, we're gonna have 4 teams that are 0-2. You got Mesoport, Imperial, the Warriors, and Fluxo, who are gonna be fighting for their tournament hopes moving into day 2. And then you have Heroic, B8, FlyQuest, and Wildcard, just one easy victory away from moving on to stage 2. So moving on to day 2 and those easy victories to get to stage 2 that I'd mentioned, the first matchup we had was gonna be FlyQuest versus Heroic. And the weird part to kind of start this off was FlyQuest actually picked for their map Anubis, which is something they've historically not been good at, and Heroic has actually been really good at. So Heroic's first map ended up being Ancient, which they would win, and then they would go to Anubis, which most people thought would be a for sure victory for Heroic, and in the end, FlyQuest actually pulled it out of the bag, but then they would go to Mirage, and FlyQuest would end up falling 2-1, moving down into the 2-1 bracket, and then Heroic would be your first 3-0 team. So moving on to the second game to get a team to move on to the second stage, and we would have B8 versus Wildcard. Trying to get an American team into the second stage, and could B8 stop them? Well, the first map would be Train, go to overtime, and Wildcard would sneak a victory. Then we would move over to Dust 2, and that's where B8 had a little bit of different plans. Some would say they backstabbed them. If you watch this clip, you'll know why.
In comes Essential to sweep the rest under the rug. Sus. He's getting knifed. He's getting knifed. NPL, audacious.
B8 would go on to win that 13-6, securing the Dust victory. That takes us over to Inferno, which, for being the last game, you're hoping this is going to make it a barn burner. It's going to be a close one, and America has a chance. Well, nope, actually they don't. They get beat 13-2. Wildcard will go down to play another day, and B8 will move on to stage 2. So why don't we look through the next set of American darlings, except for they actually got pulled versus each other in the bracket. Well, that might be unfortunate, but it's more unfortunate if you're a Complexity fan because they still did not look good. NRG was able to secure the victory and move on, and then Complexity is going to be facing elimination as we look forward. OG would continue to look strong as they would have Nico kind of backpack them to a victory versus TYLOO. You would have Negma take on Lynn Vision, securing the victory for themselves. And then lastly, you would have BetBoom take on Legacy, securing another victory, and that would wrap up the matches on day 2 that didn't end in elimination. In your first elimination match, you would have Imperial versus Mesoport, and the first game, it would be a banger. It would go into overtime. You would end up seeing a 16-13 victory, ending in heartbreak for Mesoport, but that's not where the heartbreak would end because they played Dust 2 next, and they got smoked 13-2. Ending their tournament early. They'll be your first team eliminated. Meanwhile, Imperial would get to go on to fight another day. Now, your final elimination match would be the Warriors versus Fluxo. Now, the Warriors were probably the most picked team to go 0-3, and after their matchup yesterday versus Legacy, we kind of feel like we know why. However, they didn't get that message.
Oh, you didn't see him? Oh dear.
Bro, how did you not see him?
Cool ass. He was on your
If
screen.
we could get that on the replay, please.
He was on your screen. Oh my god.
Look!
Oh my god.
He's making noise, bro!
What's going on? There's no crowd noise. Why can't we hear each other?
They came in versus Fluxo swinging. It was an arms race immediately, and they would end up winning the first map and then the second to stave off elimination, sending Fluxo home as your second team eliminated, letting the Warriors go on to also fight another day. So moving on to day 3, and the action continues. Complexity, who again was supposed to be one of your 3-0 teams, would actually be facing elimination versus TYLOO. First map would be Train, and Complexity would go up early. They would go up 6-2, but then TYLOO would rip back, resounding, getting an easy victory in the end. Then we'd move over to Inferno, and you would think, oh, there's no chance that this could happen again. Complexity also goes up again, 10-5, and well, here comes TYLOO with 7 straight rounds, end up winning 13-11. That ends Complexity's run. Did not look good. Grim had this to say afterwards.
What went wrong versus TYLOO?
I'd say again, obviously our T side was pretty good, but we lost, I think I lost the one before, and then we just lost a few clutches on T side, and then CT side, it just feels like we weren't really doing much together. Sometimes like one person was pushing, but someone was lagging behind. We weren't waiting for each other. Like we just weren't doing, it seemed like we're just never on the same page, and we struggled with that, especially on not even trained like T side in front of, we're not on the same page with a lot of stuff, like, and that's just what, bites you sometimes against the good teams.
The next elimination match, we would see a pair of Brazilian teams facing off with Imperial versus Legacy. And these games, honestly, didn't feel close. The first one you had was a quick beatdown 13-2 in favor of Legacy. And then next up, you had a 13-5 victory in favor of Imperial. And then we wrapped this up with a 13-4 victory back in favor of Legacy. I mean, for this to be such a close series, every single game was absolutely one-sided. Moving on to one of the promo matches, you had OG versus NRG. Could Nico keep up the run, or did America finally get their stage 2 team? Well, as the match would start off, you would see OG kind of take the lead early, look, dominate, get some control on the Mirage, winning 13-6. And then in the second map, they would also get the victory as well, knocking NRG down to the 2-2 bracket, and then moving on themselves into stage 2. So the next American team, Wildcard, would be playing BetBoom. And this one would feel like it wasn't going to be close at all. It started off 12-4 in favor of BetBoom. And Wildcard roared back. They pushed it to overtime. Not just one overtime, but 2 overtimes. And in the end, BetBoom would settle themselves down and get the victory, winning 19-17. But we would move into the second match and you would think, man, there's absolutely no way that this can happen again. BetBoom goes up again. This time, 12-8. Far more manageable. Clearly, Wildcard has been down from worse. And they would come back, they would push it to overtime yet again. This time it would only take 1 overtime, and unfortunately, Wildcard would fall 16-14. Moving on to your final promo match, you would have FlyQuest versus Nemiga. And this one would be reasonably close and kind of surprising here because FlyQuest would end up dropping this to Nemiga. They would move on into stage 2 and FlyQuest would have to fight on the final day to see if they could get through. Now, moving on to the last elimination game, you would have Lynn Vision versus the Warriors. And unfortunately for the Warriors, their run would come to an end here as Lynn Vision would move on to fight another day. The Warriors, unfortunately, their run's over. All right, moving on into day 4, we have 2 opportunities to have an American team move on into stage 2. So let's start it off with NRG versus Lynn Vision. We're gonna go 1 for 1? No, we're not. Lynn Vision would secure the victory. NRG fell a little flat here, and again, Lynn Vision would move on into stage 2. So you got one more chance. We got Wildcard versus Legacy. Now this Legacy team, they're the literal last team to get into this event. Probably trying to make a name for themselves and make a little bit of a run to kind of show people that they deserve to be here. And they showed up versus Wildcard, and they did just that. Not only showing people why they should be here, but showed the world they're going to stage 2 as Wildcard would fall and all American teams would be eliminated. None of them would make it to stage 2. Now, with those 2 games out of the way, that leads us to our third and final game of the day. We had FlyQuest versus TYLOO. This would also be our absolute best game of the day. First map comes out, ends up being a 13-11, very close victory by FlyQuest. You might be thinking, TYLOO backs against the wall. What are they gonna do here? It's gonna get a little sketchy. Well, the next one, they rip it out. They punch FlyQuest right in the mouth. They get a 13-3 victory. And then they do it again. They do another 13-3 victory. Quick and swift work. TYLOO is moving on to stage 2. And that wraps it up for the first stage. And, the players are gonna get tons of rest. They're gonna get about 24 hours of rest as stage 2 actually will be starting the day that you're watching this. It's gonna be lots of exciting matchups. Like, personally, I'm excited to see FaZe and Simple go up against Heroic. The players he called bots a few weeks ago. That should be exciting. Don't forget to fill out your pick'ems. You have until the hour before the first match to get those submitted. Hopefully you're playing along with us, and personally, I hope I do a little bit better in stage 2. But thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. We'll update you through all the stages as they complete. Till next time, peace out.